thinking, gosh, Congress really hasn't done much for me in 2023. You'd be right. They haven't. That's actually not an opinion. That's a fact, and I'm going to show you the numbers. Now, by the way, these are really good to have in your back pocket if you get cornered into a situation at a holiday party and you want to be smart on what's been happening this last year. I'm about to give you the Cliff Notes version. Unless, of course, it's one of those parties where you're not supposed to talk about politics, in which case, don't bring this up. But I digress. Before I get into all of that, I want to thank my subscribers for voting for this story as the bonus this week. If you want to vote too, make sure you subscribe to my page during my next live event, which is on Wednesday night. Or you can always follow these steps and you can subscribe right now. This 118th Congress, which includes a Republican-controlled House and a Democrat-controlled Senate, has only passed, wait for it, 34 bills into law. In modern history, since the 1970s, the average number of bills passed into law by the United States Congress is usually in the hundreds. Now, let me be really clear about what counts as a bill passed into law and how I'm counting Congress. I'm talking about a bill that has been passed by both the House and the Senate and has been signed into law by the President of the United States. I am not talking about resolutions that were passed. I am not talking about pieces of legislation that got a vote in one chamber but not in the other. I'm talking about a bill that went through the full process and became an actual law. And when I talk about Congress, I am talking about Congress in their 2-year capacity. So in case you don't realize that Congress is in power for 2 years, this current Congress, the 118th, will be in power from January 2023 until the new Congress is sworn in January 2025. So let's look at the actual numbers, shall we? So this chart is a really good representation of the 118th Congress and how it compares to the rest of the Congresses, dating all the way back to the 93rd Congress, which took power in 1973. So this represents 50 years of lawmaking. But let's be fair here. Each one of these columns represents a Congress which, as I just said, has been in power for 2 full years. We haven't had 2 full years yet of the 118th Congress, right? We are moving into the 2nd year of that Congress, but the fact remains, even if they were to pass bills on a record pace, it's highly unlikely the 118th Congress could even compare to any of the others in the last 50 years. So again, right here is the 118th Congress with its 34 laws. Now, before the 118th Congress came around, the least productive Congress was the 112th Congress, which was in power from 2011 to 2013, and that Congress only passed 284 bills into law. The most productive Congress, by the way, was the 95th Congress back in 1977, which passed 804 bills into law. So you might be thinking, well, Lisa, those 34 bills the 118th Congress passed into law must have been transformational, huge pieces of legislation that are going to change all of our lives, right? No. The vast majority were sort of uncontroversial bills that passed either by unanimous consent or with minimal opposition, including a law to change the names of a few VA clinics and a law to mint a coin commemorating the 250th anniversary of the Marine Corps. The list also includes laws that punt legislation to a later date. And speaking of punting legislation, that brings me to January of 2024, when the 118th Congress returns to Washington, D.C. on January 9th for the second half of their term. They're going to have 10 days to pass a bill to prevent the government from partially shutting down on January 19th. And then they'll have to pass another one in February to prevent the rest of the government from shutting down. Plus, there are major tax issues that are going to come up in 2024. Not to mention, the House of Representatives is still conducting that impeachment inquiry of President Joe Biden that's also still on their to-do list. And of course, don't forget, 2024 is an election year. And as I have said for years, the closer you get to an election, the less likely it is anything is going to pass in Congress.